Dear students, today I'm very happy to present before you another episode on cultural studies. Today's episode will concentrate on the relationship between culture and power. And I will be happy to talk about concepts of culture, theoretical perspectives, and also key concepts in cultural studies. So the first aspect will be on the concepts of culture. In everyday life, we make use of the term culture, and we speak about it very often in context to how culture exists, how culture is changing, and what are the elements that represent our culture. Now let's examine what exactly is culture. Culture is all that man learns and acquires by virtue of being a member of a certain society. It includes all aspects of human activity, from fine arts to popular entertainment, from everyday behavior to the development of sophisticated technology. It also includes plans, rules, techniques, designs, and even the policies made for better living. And in a general sense, the definition of culture is historically rooted and ideologically also complex. But we can generalize its definition according to the edited volume of Introduction to Cultural Studies. And here, culture can be defined at three levels. The first, which is culture as art and forms of aesthetics. This aspect of culture comprises music, literature, painting, films, among other fine arts, of course. This definition of culture refers also to the refined pursuit in which people change in general. However, it also gives the concept of culture an elitist perspective. And this means, of course, if we take this into consideration, that such forms of culture may not be accessible to everyone, but just to specific people within a certain society. Many texts describe this understanding of culture as a culture with capital C. Culture with capital C because it is not accessible for everyone. That's the first. Second, which is culture as a way of life. Here, culture can also be defined as something that refers to a way of life. According to Raymond Williams, this way of life could be of a people, a period or a group, or humanity in general. And from the anthropological perspective, culture as proposed by Edward Taylor states that it is, to quote Edward Taylor, that complex whole which includes knowledge, belief, art, morals, law, custom, and any other capabilities and habits acquired by humans as members of society. A particular way of life can be achieved through creation and use of symbols. We create symbols, and we tend to use these symbols within a certain society. An example of this is the national flag, for instance, which is a shared idea among people of a country. We create that symbol, which is a flag, and people use it as a way of unification within society. When people start sharing different meanings of different symbols, it begins to affect the way people live their lives in groups, communities, societies, and countries. That's the second, which is culture as a way of life. The third definition, which is culture as the process of development. This particular definition is one of the oldest. It refers to culture as a process of evolution and change. This development may apply to different facets of society and civilization. It traces the changes of a certain society and civilization during lifespan. Let us look at the term agriculture, for instance. Agriculture means the growth and the development of plants and crops. In a similar way, the word culture, which implies progression, can denote the growth and the development of the social world. And in here we come to the description or to the definition of culture at three levels. The first level is a culture with capital C, or culture with big C. Second, culture as a way of life. And three, culture as the process of development. In here, when we come up to this conclusion, we need to know the root of these definitions, which will lead us to the theoretical perspectives of culture in general. There are various theoretical perspectives with respect to culture, and this is the second level of our discussion. And some of them can be concluded as follows. Diffusionism. Diffusionism is an approach which views the transformation of culture change and the evolution of society. It is a school of thought which uses the comparative method to explain why different societies are at the similar levels in terms of their development, and also maintains that societal change takes place when societies borrow cultural traits from one another. This is the main concept of diffusionism. And here we can take, for instance, Alfred Gruber, who significantly contributed to the theory of diffusionism. According to him, diffusion is a process by which cultural materials spread. The diffused cultural materials contain specific elements by which diffusion from diffuse can be recognized. Diffusion in some cases is a piecemeal where only fragments of a larger system reach or are accepted by the affected culture. These bits may diffuse more widely than the cultural complexes of which they form a partial part. Gruber here puts forward the concept of idea transmission or stimulus transmission. And in an article called Stimulus Diffusion, published in 1940, he said that cultural products may be imitated by people who did not have direct contact with its originator. And a broad idea is passed on from one culture to another. But the receiving culture or civilization only internalizes those pieces of the received ideas which are suitable for them. So the first one is cultural diffusionism, and it deals with how cultures diffuse their traits from one generation into another. The second theoretical conceptualization concerns cultural materialism. This theory is associated mainly with Raymond Williams. And Raymond Williams, by the way, as we can see, is one of the pioneers of the field of cultural studies. The analysis made in cultural materialism is based on critical theory. A tradition of Frankfurt School, of course. And Raymond Williams coined the term cultural materialism to describe a theoretical blending of Marxist analysis and leftist culturalism. And Williams, of course, he emphasized the material significance of culture. According to him, culture is a lived experience. The experience we live is culture in itself. This is according to Raymond Williams, of course. And it consists of meanings generated by ordinary men and women. They lived experiences of the participants and the texts and practices engaged in by all people as they conduct their life. culture is not free of material conditions. And according to cultural materialism, culture is simply neither a reflection of economic forces and relationships, nor is it an abstract and idealistic entity. But culture is made up of texts which are produced and consumed through social processes, and we will come later to talk about the relationship between text and culture. So these texts are produced and consumed through social processes and ways of life of specific groups. And as a conclusion here, culture immaterializes theory as in relation to the concern with the specific historical documents which are analyzed. To make this particular aspect clear, cultural immaterialities theory is concerned with the historical documents and how these specific historical documents are analyzed. So cultural materialists analyze the methods by which hegemonic forces, and this is another concept which we are going to come to discuss later, which is hegemony or hegemony, forces in society, how cultural materialists analyze the methods by which hegemonic forces within a certain society take control over historically important texts. Cultural materialists want to bring attention to the means used by contemporary power structure, like, for instance, the church or state, in order to disseminate ideology. Again, ideology is another important concept in the field of cultural studies, and I will come later during this course to speak about the concept of ideology. So Williams here has insisted that culture is understood through the representations and practices of our daily life. In addition, this has to be done in the context of material conditions of culture and their production. And according to Raymond Williams, this is cultural materialism. The third is the functionalism. Functionalism is the view that society consists of institutions which serve important purposes for people. Rather than focusing on the origins and evolution of society according to this school of functionalism, the functionalists explored the relationships among different institutions and how these institutions functioned to serve society and or individuals. There are two divisions within functionalism or the functionalist theory. The first is the psychological functionalism, and the second is structural functionalism. For the psychological functionalism, we can take Malinowski's functionalism method, which has focused on how society functions to serve an individual's needs and interests. The second, which is structural functionalism, and we can talk here about Radcliffe Brown, and this is associated who is associated actually with this type of functionalism. He stressed on the structure of society. So for psychological functionalism, they focused on how society functions to serve the individual's needs. And for this one, they stressed on the structure of society and the way it was reflected in different institutions which function to perpetuate the survival of society. And for him also, a society's economic, political, religious and social institutions serve to integrate the society as a whole. So Malinowski said that Every culture is a working whole, an integrated unity in which every element has a functional contribution to make the function of an institution. And here he's talking, for instance, about an organized system of activity, which is the part it plays within the interrelated whole in fulfilling human purposes or needs. Malinowski distinguishes between three types or levels of needs, which had to be met by all cultures. And these are primary or biological needs, derived or instrumental needs, and integrative or synthetic needs. For the primary or biological needs, it includes nutrition, defense, and protection, for instance. For the derived or instrumental needs, it includes economic organization, law, education, and so on and so forth. And for the integrative or synthetic needs, it includes knowledge, magic, religion, art, play, and so on and so forth. So, Malinowski worked out a theory of human needs in relation to the institutions. He maintained that there are certain basics or certain basic psycho-biological needs, and every society has to evolve institutions to fulfill them. Therefore, behind each institution, there is the basic psychological and biological needs. According also to Radcliffe Brown, the main object of study in anthropology is the social structure and not culture. And the social system comprises the sum total of all social relationships existing among individuals in a given society, and who occupy social roles. Brown knew that the basic need for everyday society is co-adaptation, which means mutual adjustment of individual members. And a society, according to him, exists and involves institutions to fulfill this basic need. He tries to explain this by reference to totemism in primitive society. And in here, while Malinowski built a system of thought around the concept of culture, Brown made the concept of society very central. And according to Brown, the function of an element of culture is the part it plays in the social life as a whole. And therefore, the contribution it makes to the main maintenance of the structural continuity is important. The fourth theory is social interaction or symbolic interactionism. Symbolic interaction was one of the first social theories to address that we use culture in order to learn. This theory developed during the 1920s and 1930s, and it had a variety of labels until Herbert Blumer gave it its current name in 1969. So, Mead, a University of Chicago philosopher and social activist, provided a suitable way of understanding social life. He put forward, each one of us learns successfully, this is what he says, each one of us learns successfully to play many different social roles through the interaction with others. And our actions are being conditioned by others, while simultaneously we are also affecting their actions. The goal is not to manipulate or dominate each other, but rather to create and sustain a productive social unit. Human socialization permits more or less conscious interpretation of stimuli and also allows planned responses. And this happens because of symbols. The use of these symbols transformed the socialization process. Why? Because symbols mediate and structure our ability to perceive and interpret whatever goes on around us. Our actions in response to symbols are mediated. Therefore, a person's, for instance, understanding of and relation to his or her physical or objective reality is moderated by the symbolic environment. And as I said before, we can take, for instance, the flag, our Moroccan flag. Our Moroccan flag means everything in our life. But if we take another country's flag, this symbol means or would mean nothing to us. In here, without symbols, our social relations would be limited. For we would have no dependable mechanisms for perceiving others in terms of relationships. The next theory is popular and mass culture, the circuit of culture, if we want to make it this way. Our daily life is surrounded and invaded by popular culture. For instance, music, soap, operas on television, comic books, and sports, etc. We cannot imagine our life without these. It is only in the industrial societies that we see this form of culture. Mass culture is mass manufactured and mass produced. It is the culture which is tailored according to the taste of the mass audiences. Therefore, mass culture refers to cultural products solely designed for mass consumption, and popular culture is a positive term for mass-produced or mass-disseminated cultural products. Growth and spread of mass culture are linked with the development of technology used for communication. You might think, for instance, on our current situation and how we do use social network as a means of communication today. This is exactly what popular and mass culture is talking about. Let's talk, for instance, Stuart Hall. Stuart Hall suggested that political economy in some ways structures encoding and decoding of media objects. Media culture is produced within an industrial organization of production, of course. And in here, products are generated according to codes and models accepted within culture industries. In 1973, Hall published an essay called Encoding, Decoding, and this essay was very, very important in this way. In a way that he proposed a model of media reception. According to him, Stuart Hall, certain cultural codes are so widely circulated and integrated into the mainstream culture that they can be seen as naturalized. These codes are most likely be perceived in ways which closely resemble the meanings put forward by the encoder itself. He says that the majority of people decode cultural meanings by producing negotiated readings which are the product of their own experiences and local culture. That's why we have this vibration of meanings and counter meanings produced within society. And of course, I need to remind you that hegemony and ideology play pertinent role in accepting those meanings within culture. So these products of their own experiences and local cultures are products of the dynamics of decoding and encoding. Stuart Hall has also analyzed which are a product, Stuart Hall also has analyzed Stuart Hall has analyzed in his article, Encoding Decoding, culture as a continuous circuit. It encompasses production, distribution, production. He says that we need to analyze how media audiences produce messages, how they circulate these messages, and how the audiences use or decode those messages to create meaning. Through circuit of culture, we can study and analyze the meaning of cultural artifacts, and this theory helps us to understand why media cultural studies should focus more on analyzing media, corporation practices and promotion campaigns. It also helps us to grasp the ways in which media culture is produced, circulated and distributed. The next, which is culture as an industry. And in here we will talk about Fisk definition of culture industry versus reading popular culture. And this, of course, will be the talk of the next episode. I hope you benefit from this session or this episode. Thank you very much and see you in the coming episode.